Jensen. And I'm Mike Cruz. I'm the Executive Operations Director here. And first of all, for the welcome was Brigadier General Greg Hazy. And he was the commander here. And also he is our chairman of the board of the museum. He's done a great job for us in how we're progressed over the time. So I'll give it to Greg.
Thanks, Mike. Boy, doesn't that just set the tone? Could you kind of hear the klaxon going off? Yeah. You see Russ Jensen boarding the F89, just readying for takeoff. So it brought back that vivid image to me. It was just like, wow, yeah, this is an active alert facility. Some 60 years ago, I guess, or better. But today we're here to dedicate an airplane to Russ Jensen, Lieutenant Colonel. And first, let me welcome all of you. Say thanks for being here today on this beautiful Saturday morning. Second, let me thank all the people who participated in making this event available. Julie, I know you worked hard on this, Esslinger, and then a lot of the folks here at the... Oh, there you are, thank you. And a lot of the folks, volunteers here at the wing, or at the museum. So thank you all for the work you put into making this a really grand event. So, you know, Russ I've met many times, and you know, when you think about an officer in the Air Force, and when he started in 58 or 59, where it was when he went to pilot training, you know, what a glorious career he had. He was really a stand-up guy in so many ways. You know, terrific pilot, great friend, and certainly, you know, dear to all of us. And so, you know, I always thought of him being a high-standing character, but I also thought of him as being a good judge of character. He married Julie, so I mean, that's a testament to that. But Russ is really a hallmark to us, to say the least. So it's appropriate that his name occupies one of our F89, our single F89. You know what I was thinking for the family here, it's pretty special. There's not too many families that can say, I have a keepsake that's an F89. And so the Jensen family will now have a keepsake that's an F89, something you can cherish forever, something that, you know, certainly the family deserved for your service and your sacrifice through the years and the years. And finally, I'd like to just say a special thanks for all the retirees. Good to see my old friend Birdman here again, so Stan Christensen, thanks for showing up, and I guess Ron Hokinson was going to be here, and Mr. Baglane, and it's just fun to catch up with some of the old folks. I saw Sonra here too, and some years ago when I was just maybe a captain when you were out here as the curator, it was always fun to come over to the museum and see what was news. So thank you all, and I hope you enjoy this day. It certainly is a highlight for the museum.
What we have is some special guests here. First off, Stan Christensen. He has been here for many years as the head docent. He's the head cleaner here. He was working on airplanes. We can't thank Stan enough. And when he had people here from little toddlers up to adults, he made them feel like they were part of this museum. And he did a great job. So just raise your hand, Stan. Is there Serena Forsum here? Oh, she was the office manager here under Stan and other people, and I never got to meet you, but I hear just great things about you, and so let's give her a big hand. Ron Hokinson wanted to come, but he had some health issues that came up, and he couldn't make it, even though we're going to have somebody pick him up and bring him here, but he said he couldn't make it. But Ron, he was here from the beginning. He was the guardsman who retired out of here. He was a maintenance person, and if you needed any kind of information on an airplane or history or anything, Ron was the person to go to. We've got Dave Himmer here. Dave, raise your hand, please. He was a command sergeant out here, and he was one of the best out here. And he, if you're a veteran, you have a question, that's the man to see. Because he has helped so many, he's helped me on my issues and things like that. And Dave, thank you for being out here, and thank you for being a friend. And then we want to say thank you to Terry Morris. Raise your hand. Take your A. Kevin Auger, or as he says, his real name is OJ. And they're right back here because it's a French name. And Orhan, where's Orhan? All right, these guys were dedicated and painted the F89 and put the decals on and everything, and we couldn't be more happy, and it was just a great job by all. So thank you guys. Next speaker will be Greg Bastier. He's retired Air Force, regular Air Force for 20 years as an aircraft mechanic. And he's going to tell you a little bit, if you don't know about the F89 right now, he'll tell you about what we have to, or what you'll have to know. So, Greg?
Good morning. I'm not much of a public speaker, so please bear with me. But I'm here to talk about the F89. F89 is called the F89 Scorpion. Northrop designed and built the F89 as an all-weather fighter interceptor for the Air Defense Command. It could locate, intercept, and destroy enemy aircraft by day or night under all types of weather conditions. The aircraft was initially designed to replace the P-61 Black Widow. The F-89 was one of the most heavily armed fighter aircraft and was the backbone of the North American Air Defense Command. The aircraft was among the first Air Force jet fighters with guided missiles, and notably the first combat aircraft armed with air-to-air nuclear weapons, the Genie rocket. Both Minnesota flying squadrons of the Minnesota Air National Guard flew the F-89 on active air defense missions beginning in the late 1950s. The 109th Fighter Interceptor Squadron took over the F-89s of a deactivated Air Force squadron along with the alert hangars that now house this museum, speaking of this building here, defending the northern border of the United States from potential attack of Russian bombers during the Cold War. The defense mission, if needed, called for the pilots to ram their aircraft into invading Russian bombers if all their munitions were expended or malfunctioned to stop the invading aircraft. Several interesting facts of the F-89. The first flight took place on 16 August 1948. Besides 2 prototypes, there was a total of 1,050. They were built in Hawthorne, California. Cost of one of these aircraft was $988,884. Had a range of 1,366 miles. Maximum speed 635 miles per hour. A service ceiling 49,200 feet. And the aircraft were retired from the Air Force in 1968. Another note is that it's not uncommon for air crews and ground crews to give their aircraft unofficial nicknames. A couple of unofficial names given to the F-89 are the Stanley Steamer and the Fod Vacuum. In closing, those of us who can remember the Cold War, the civil defense shelters, civil defense drills in schools, and incidents like the Cuban Missile Crisis can thank the F-89 air and ground crews pulling 24/7 alerts to protect and keep us safe from Russian aggression. That's all I have. Thank you.
Our next speaker will be Terry Morris talking about Russ Jensen. And he was in the 934th, but we won't hold that against him. He was a loan master. So he made sure the airplane flew right and everything was balanced out. He was a 3M executive, and now he's the secretary at on the board. And Terry, it's all yours.
Thank you, everybody. First off, I got to say, public speaking is something I struggle with because basically, when I did my Myers-Briggs, I was an I. I was definitely an I. But I do rise to the occasion when I have to, and hopefully this is one of those times. My knowing of Russ Jensen came mostly from when I did an interview with him in 2019 for our newsletter. During that time, normally when I do those interviews, for those of you who sat through, you know that they normally take about 30 to 40 minutes to do it. In Russ's case, he was so engaging that it took almost 2 hours. And I was fascinated by all of the information that he gave me. And obviously I couldn't put all that into the article, but I just learned so much from him. Before I even talk about some instances of some of the things that he told me, I want to say that I was really struck by his warmth, his candor, his knowledge, and even to some degree, humility, which is really a positive thing. You know, he just came across as just a genuine, nice person. A person you wanted to have coffee with, you wanted to talk to, and he could talk back to you. You just felt really comfortable around him. He was also an excellent storyteller, too. We talked about the fact that he flew F-89s, and that's why we're here today, to talk about the F-89. And he actually flew them out of these hangars here. But what he did was, rather than just say, you know, I flew the F-89, and this, and did this, and that kind of stuff, he actually set the stage like a storyteller. You felt like you were there. He talked about the fact that their missions would go, they would basically stay in these hangars for like 10 days at a crack, and then when the alarm went off, they would have to jump down fire poles. And I said, fire poles? And he said, yeah, they actually had fire poles in here, just like real firemen. And so that they could get into the airplane and get airborne within 3 to 5 minutes from the alert. And then be guided off to who knows where, all the way up into Canada. Just unbelievable. Russ also, as maybe some of you know, those of you who know him really well, he was the chairman for this organization for many years. And during that time period, he also participated, or actually was a major key person leading the efforts to procure some of the museum's airplanes that we actually have. When I asked him, I said, well, what are you most proud of that you did for the museum? He said, the acquisition of the C-123. And I said, well, what's that all about? And he said, well, we went to the boneyard. He said, got a bunch of people together, an ad hoc team, went to the boneyard, got the C-123, and then put it in condition for a one-time flight back here to Minneapolis, and we got it here, and we brought it in. That C-123 made it possible for it ultimately for us to get the C-97 that we actually have out there right now. He actually facilitated that one as a horse trade. But from talking to Bruce Graham, there's a little more to that story as far as what he was probably proud of. I think he was proud of the fact that he even got it here in the first place in one piece, because they had 3 things that they were fighting when they came here with that airplane. They had fuel gauges that didn't work properly, so they literally have to land, and it's the equivalent, I use these terms when I used to have my boat, in the water, get out there, kick the tank to see if there was any gas in the They also had landing gear indicator lights that didn't work properly, systems that didn't work properly. So they literally, before they landed, one of them had to go back there, and Russ flew the plane back. It was one of the 2 pilots flew it back. They literally had to go back there and check and see if the landing gear was down and locked. And then the third thing, which was my favorite, which Bruce said, was that when they flew the plane back, they had radios that didn't work properly. And as a result, at least on one occasion, they had to contact the tower for landing instructions using a cell phone. I don't know how that works, but obviously it was a pre-9/11 world. But, you know, he just loved that. He loved that plane. And eventually, he was also able to negotiate a deal with, I guess it's Hawkins and Powers out in Wyoming, to get the C-97. He literally went out there and picked the plane out of the ones that they had on hand, the one that we have out here, and selected it for the museum. When I came to the museum in 2012, of course, Russ was no longer on the board of directors, but he was always working hard to further improve this museum, always, even as a volunteer. And I still remember many days when he would be here on Saturdays, and Sam was training me in on becoming an alternate docent. And he'd be talking to Stan, he'd say, well, I'm going to go out here and work on the C-97. And he'd go out there, he'd work for 3 or 4 hours on it as far as improving the cockpit and that sort of thing, trying to make it presentable for people to see. And he'd get done, he'd say, well, it's got enough done for this weekend. This week I'll be back next week to work on it more. He actually did that, as I remember, up until the time, almost until the time he could no longer do it physically. So this shows the dedication that he had. You know. I'm going to say, closing, what I want to say about him. He was always there to help us. He always helped me when I needed help. And if I had questions that had anything to do with legal matters, as far as things with the museum, as I became secretary, I could always go to him as a resource and he would help me out. He actually designed the contracts that we used, went through and hired all of our archivists as part of those grants. And we use that extensively. But like I said, in closing, what I would like to say is there's something that came up during the discussion with an interview that will be coming up in our next newsletter. And there was a term that was introduced, our slang that was introduced in that, about the idea of leaving it better than you find it. And I think that describes Russ to a T. That's exactly what he did. So, thank you very much.
Next speaker is our favorite man from St. Paul. He used to be vice commander here, Jamie Lindman. And he'll give you a little synopsis of everything here, and we hope someday he'll come back to us. So.
Hello, good morning. Thanks, Mike. Thanks to the museum for hosting this wonderful event. Glad to be here. Thanks, Julie, for inviting me. So truly my honor to be here, to get to know Russ a little bit. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about my perspective and a little bit about the squadron perspective when he would come visit the squadron, a few stories. So first of all, if you're not familiar, when you walk into the operations building, even today, when you first walk in there, your eyes are immediately drawn up to a Curtiss Oriole biplane, which is a whole long story we won't get into. But it's of course, the original aircraft of the 109th Airlift Squadron. And on the tail are the words, "We fly anywhere." Big, bold letters. And that same motto is on the doors if you were to leave the squadron leading out to the flight line. "We fly anywhere." So it's kind of the unofficial motto of the aircrew. And I think it's as relevant today as it was over 100 years ago. You know, Ray Miller's words, his message to the world. But I think most importantly represents kind of the passion that Russ Jensen and many others before and after have had for flying. Also in the squadron, there is I'm not sure exactly when I first met Russ, but I know when I first heard his name, because also in the squadron there is a plaque which lists all the squadron commanders since the beginning. Of course, with over 100-year history, there's roughly 50 names on there. Obviously, very storied history and amazing accomplishments by these men. And so, being in the squadron a little while, you start hearing snippets of stories. These names and who was that? At the top of the list, there's Major William Garris. For those that don't know, he was the commander in 1920 on the yet-to-be-designated squadron and one of 3 champions from this amazing unit. Of course, there's Ray Miller, the pilot of the Oriole. Back in 1920, he paved the way for the first federally recognized air unit in the National Guard. And really, he was widely regarded as kind of the godfather of not only the 109th Airlift Squadron today, but also the Minnesota Air National Guard. Captain Albert de Fuhr, he was a World War II commander in the European theater, killed in action shortly after he relinquished command of the 109th while serving in another unit. Lieutenant Colonel John Doley, another name on the plaque. World War II hero and kind of a fast-burning leader who later became the 133rd Wing Commander, serving for over 27 years. Major Ken Dahlberg, probably our most decorated World War II ace. Now if Russ were here, he'd probably correct me and say, "Now Jamie, know that he was shot down 3 times, safely parachuted down all 3 times, and the 3rd time he was captured and served in the POW camp for 3 months." So yeah, just a truly amazing list of people, and these are just some of many, but of course roughly halfway down the list, at least today, is Lieutenant Colonel Russ Jensen. And he was kind of known as a Cold War hero, flying numerous aircraft, including the F89, C-97, C-130, amongst many others. But again, just back to the motto, we fly everywhere and everything. And I found out that Russ was around base, and at some point I ran into him, and I still remember upon meeting him that he still had that spark. You could just see that he had that passion to fly. Probably hadn't changed in the 40 or 50 years prior. And although he and I were a generation apart, I really felt that Russ was kind of a kindred spirit. We had a same interest, same passion. So we got to be friends. And then fast forward a few years, I had the honor of being selected as the squadron commander for the airlift squadron, and I instituted a graybeard speaker that I would bring in to talk to the squadron during a commander's call. So who was the first person that I went to ask if they'd be willing to come in as a graybeard? Of course, it was Lieutenant Colonel retired Russ Jensen. I don't even think I was able to finish the question, and Russ said, "Yes, I'll be there, Jamie. Just tell me where and when." And I really think he enjoyed telling the stories as much as the entire squadron, all the airmen, and both men and women enjoyed hearing them. And now the kicker is, whether we're good or lucky, we did get a video of that. In fact, that video is out on YouTube. It's challenging to find, but I'll gladly share the video. And I was able to watch the video a little in preparation for today. So I'm going to share you just a few snippets. Again, these are Russ's words back from that Graybeard speech in December of 2015. The one thing about the F-89 is when you first fly the airplane, it's the first time you've been in the airplane. And that's spooky, when you got that much power under your seat. In reference to the C-97, he said, "The Air Force, what they did for me was they gave me an airplane with 16,000 cubic feet of space, pay me to go to Japan, buy stuff, and come home. The C-97 was the funnest time of my life. Again, we flew everywhere." In regards to C-130s, he says, "We were in Vietnam and Philippines an awful lot." And here's where I'll ad-lib a little bit, but he talked at some length about his memory of flying back those bodies, but flying back those soldiers, airmen. He almost broke down. That really affected him. And I have a soft spot for that too, because unfortunately, I've had some of those same experiences still today in C-130s from Afghanistan, Iraq, etc. But he really looked back on that with great pride, and that ultimately is probably the most important mission he did. I think that's how I feel, and I think that's how he felt. He also talked about people. He said, "The people that I worked with, all the support people that supported this mission were always amazing. You have a tradition here. You guys are the best, and you know you are. We always were, and we always will be." Then he also commented about the larger organization here in the Air National Guard. He says, "Why do we get along as an organization? Longevity. We all knew each other. We all get along. We all trust each other. We produce experts in all areas. It's family here. We have people, names like Kazak and Jensen and Neeson. We served and we encouraged our families to serve. There are a lot of airmen whose parents and grandparents have served, and that is part of what makes this place special." Now, fast forward a few months, and we do an annual Christmas party. So we had invited both Russ and Julie to attend our Christmas party. And I have to go on a tangent quick and give you a little history or a tradition at the 109. This tradition predates me, in fact predates Russ. But the tradition, we have no young kids here, so it's a little racy, but the tradition is that anytime someone retires, usually the squadron commander will stand up and say, hey, let's say so long to Captain Johnson. And when the commander says that, everyone stands up and says, so long, asshole. And so it's a very, like I said, it doesn't sound very endearing, but truly it isn't endearing. It's a tradition that's gone on since World War II or whenever. So at this Christmas event, when Russ and Julie were there, we all had a great time. It was nearing the end of the evening, and we had all kind of gathered. We saw they were starting to say their goodbyes, and so trying to be a little quiet about it, we said, hey, let's all, before Russ and Julie walk out the door, we're gonna say so long to them. So they were getting their coats on, just about ready to walk out the door, and I stand up and I said, excuse me everyone, let's everyone say so long to Russ and Julie. Before we had got that out, Russ and Julie in perfect unison call back to us and say, so long, assholes! So that just tells you the wit. This was not too long ago. It's probably 2016 or so. But we just got the biggest kick of Russ and Julie attending that event. In closing, I don't know if I ever heard Russ say this quote, but I'm certain this quote epitomizes his love for flying. Author unknown, but the quote is, you can watch the clouds go by, or you can fly above them. So, thank you for your service, Russ. God bless, and congratulations.
Well, it was great. So where's Karen Wolf? Karen, come on up here. Julie, come here. Sharon, I'm going to be in trouble. Come on, Sharon. This is my wife. I'm in trouble already. These are the three people that are most important here set this up. And I want to thank them. And these two planned it. My wife was the one who got your information, put it in security and everything like that. And without them, this wouldn't have worked out. So big hand for these people here. All right, next step, we get up and stretch our legs. We'll go out to the F89, and we've got champagne, little glasses, so we'll toast and go out to the F89.